Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Michael Prichard, good to see you.
Hello, Paul.
That sounded very natural. That was good.
Yes.
Well, to make it even more unnatural and awkward, how about we start with a quote? Because I like to do that. And I actually asked the AI for a good quote because I'm not creative enough to find one.
Nice.
But there's a Dutch computer scientist, Edgar Dijkstra, right? And he said, the question of whether a computer can think is no more interesting than the question of whether a submarine can swim. Now, do you think that's just because he was too lazy to think about such an analogy, or is there something to that?
And can you repeat it one more time? I gotta hear
Sure.
this one more time. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
The question of whether a computer can think is no more interesting than the question of whether a submarine can swim. What do you think of that?
Uh, Interesting. He's Dutch, right? That makes sense. The I mean, my initial reaction, and I'm not an academic, so this is really hard for me, kind of world, but like, is I don't agree. Well, or like, what do you mean by swim? The fact that a submarine could be underwater, is that what he means by swim? Or like swim on it? I don't think we should. I don't think a computer we should be innately assuming it can think. I don't think that's accurate in my mind. If that's
Right.
what he's talking about,
Could be what he's talking about.
yeah, I don't quite understand the analogy, to be honest with you, but if it's about like, we should not be, a computer can think or should be able to think. We should. I don't know. I feel like we're trying to figure that out now.
Right.
So
Right.
that-
It's
that's
pretty
that's
ambiguous.
it's ambiguous. It's a tough one for me to comment on because I don't quite
Yeah.
understand the analogy.
It's a pretty terrible quote. I'm sorry I brought it
Yeah,
up.
it's all right. But it's a good quote. I mean, who knows?
No, it's good.
Was it really him? Did you check the sources, or did it?
I did. I did.
Okay, good. So, or like
Yeah.
with some hallucination. I mean, I can ask Claude right now to give us a quote.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey,
Make up a quote that's profound about computer science, and it's
in the style of Hunter Thompson, that
Yeah,
would make it
exactly.
interesting.
exactly.
Well, no, hey, it's good
Yeah.
to reconnect here. I
Yeah.
know we're brothers of the same sort of town here in
Yes.
lovely Charlottesville, Virginia, but we're talking remotely
Yeah, that's on
because
me. Apologize.
no, it's on me too because I haven't quite figured out how to do the dual mic thing. The studio is still evolving, but
Yes.
but no, I appreciate you taking the time here because you've um, this podcast is about autonomous vehicles, AI, robotics. You've been you've been heavily involved with AI. You're obviously been a serial founder of multiple companies. You're now have this really interesting endeavor called Multiply AI.
Mm.
And I know, you started this company WillowTree, which has been a successful mobile app company,
Mhm.
among many other things. So I just kind of wanted to kind of set the tone here to kind of give folks who are listening their um, perspective of kind of where you come from and what you do. And I wanted to kind of just lead off with what got you interested. What were sort of the earliest experiences that got you interested in AI? What makes AI so personally
Mm.
interesting to you?
Mhm.
And where did this come
Yeah.
from?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm the sort of person that I love technology, and it's pretty stupid to say that, but I literally started on your T-shirt. I love it because the Commodore 64, and we come from the same generation, so we both have the Ataris and the Commodores, and so which is awesome. I think we're the best generation. Well, not the best, but unbiased. But the Commodore 64. um, is when I started coding, right? In like middle school, like literally. And the only reason I was coding at the time was because I wanted to play video games, and we didn't have, the internet that our kids have today. Like I couldn't just, I lived in Greece at the time. My dad was U.S. military, mom's Greek, so I moved around a lot. We had I couldn't afford the phone BBS and stuff like that. You know, you remember those things? So I
Oh
started
yeah,
coding,
the
and
phone
and it,
decoupler. It was called a
yeah,
coupler.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like high tech, and there's no way heck that my parents we could even not even afford the equipment, let alone afford to pay for the call to do that. So and so I did like literally type in code from the back of a magazine, and that got me really interested in technology and computers in general, right? Like they're just fascinating machines. Um, and there were machines that I was able to interact with and I could do things with. So I started writing my own stuff. So that was really fascinating to me. And so, I know it's not quite AI, but it's the beginnings of my curiosity about, what can we get machines to do for us, as humans. And, throughout my career, I've worked on sort of like the next generation of where things were going, right? Not because I'm like super smart, because I'm not. It was more because that was sort of like where I happened to fall into and get really interested in. So, I spent a lot of time, during college in the labs, and that was like the early, 90s, mid 90s. So like all the .com, all the like it was like exciting time, and we were. It was the true Wild West, I think, of our age. Anyone could do anything, and and that was sort of like the beginnings of that. Well, that's the beginnings of the time that I started actually hearing the terms AI, as artificial intelligence or AI. These are not, I would say, new ideas in computer science, but you know, there obviously were different periods of the time. So I started hearing about then, got really excited, interested in that. And of course, everybody's reading all the, you know, sci-fi books
Yeah.
and they're talking about a lot of things you see today. Um, and then I got into mobile apps because I was, early on, like I had one of the first apps in the store. So et cetera. So I, built a company around that. And then I started reading a book in 2015 called Rise of the Robots. Um, and I feel like I'm losing my mind right now because I do not remember the author's name, but
I'll
I'm
put it
sure.
up here. I'll look it
Yeah,
up
yeah,
and I'll
yeah.
put it up.
It's called Rise of the Robots. And it talked, it wasn't like entirely about robots. It was talking about technology and artificial intelligence and really more was like, even like to the point of like how, our world of society is changing, right? Like where, productivity and work, wages, for example, like that, like the income inequality. There's a lot of like really more uh, profound, like there's things happening in a society based on technology that it's obviously affecting a lot of things. And so I got really excited about that. I got really excited about the idea that that we were coming to a point where we could make more intelligent machines to help us. Help us being a
Yeah.
keyword. And so like that was around 2015. Around 2016, I was like just doing my own research, my own just reading into it and, kind of just messing around like everybody else, like the classic stuff. And then I got a call. I don't know if I should tell the story, but I won't mention names. But I got a call from a friend of mine because they knew I was getting into it, so quote unquote. And he was like, "Hey, Michael, like, and these guys are heavy data science kind of people." And he was like, "Hey, Michael, we're going to go to ICML, which is the International Conference of Machine Learning. It was in New York at the time in 2016 at the Marquis Marriott or whatever. And he goes, quote, "We have a seat on the plane. Do you want to go?" It seems like we have a seat on the plane. I don't know what that meant, but I know that's got to be something cool. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm going. And so, I get trucked up there in a private jet, which is like insane because it's not my normal mode of transportation. And then I spent 4 days at ICML. Um, and I don't know if you're familiar with ICML, but it was at the time, I don't know if it's different now. I've been in a
Yeah.
while, but
Can
like,
you mention what it stands
yeah,
for if you know?
International Conference of Machine Learning, and it's an academic conference where a lot of researchers will come and they basically present their papers and their findings, right? So they, everything from, um, yeah, so anything across the world of data science and, and artificial intelligence obviously is part of that. Um, and this was 2015, 2016. So it's like sort of the beginnings of Transformers and, like the stuff that we kind of like everybody kind of knows today. But regards to that, I was sitting through these talks and I I understood maybe 2% of what the hell they were talking about. But I was like enamored. I'm like, this is it. Based on the rise of robots, the technology changing. Like, I'm like, this is the future. Like, we got to get it. So I got really excited about like, what can we do with this technology? And then literally after that is when I started thinking about like, okay, how do I like get into this? So I went honestly came back and kind of did like a mini rollout of WillowTree, which by the time, by the way, I mean, still is blowing up, but like it was doing great, right? But I was like, I'm done. Apps are cool. Now I got to move into this next world, and so I ended up starting a whole other company, and just went all heads down on AI, and mainly because I just thought it is it's a technology that I think it's the next. I mean, I think it's changing everything, right? Like ours, so that I'm just excited about being part of that story. I just want to be part of it. So I've been in it for, over 7 years. So
You touched on a lot there that we
yeah,
can unpack, but I mean,
yeah,
the because as you know, AI is a
yeah,
broad term, right? A lot
yes,
of people today, when they hear AI, they're going to think, if they're just new to it, they're going to think Chat GPT and generative AI type things. But
yeah,
and maybe 5 years ago it was strictly neural networks
yes,
and the different applications. But really, AI, as you know, has a broad application to all kinds of techniques and technologies for representing human intelligence, right? There's knowledge
yeah,
based AI, there were expert systems, there were probably even those in the earliest days of the Commodore 64, some of the things that we were tinkering with
yes,
were AI, super weak,
yeah,
super mega weak, kick sand in the face kind of AI, and but now it's obviously vastly improved, and there have been a lot of what are they call AI winters, right? Over the years
yes,
where people got
yes,
psyched about something and then
yes.
it kind of got deflated. But it's different now,
We
and
hope.
it sounds like you were riding that
Yeah,
wave as many of us
yeah,
have been,
yeah,
right, in different
yeah,
capacities. So
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, I hope, I think, I mean, you've been in this longer than I have, obviously, but like, it's there's always the hype, and then there's like it gets pulled from under us. I think there's still a lot of hype right now, obviously, but I don't think I think you might see a little bit of I really feel like we're coming to a crest of a wave. I just I that's how I feel about it. I think we have other challenges. I hate to use the word. I hate to use say AI. By the way, it just drives me crazy because like, what does that mean? But like, I think we have a lot of other challenges right now. But I think the technology is finally coming to some maturity stage where it's actually going to be useful. Actually be useful for us. So
Yeah, well, I mean, there's
yeah,
this hype because you see it doing
yeah,
something, right? And then
yeah,
some people who are in the know think about applications that are going to be realistic, and some think about
yeah.
things that are just not going to happen. Like, how many people are asking ChatGPT questions like, um, who's going to be the next president, right? It's like, okay, come on,
Yeah.
maybe that's not the right application. Maybe code generation and other types of
Hmm.
there's that's just one, but there are many applications for it, and I of course, I totally agree with you, but I think that's kind of what we want to explore in this
Hmm.
conversation is why. What are some of the rudimentary things that make this sort of this new wave? And
Hmm.
you hinted at it, transformer architectures that were introduced
Hmm.
in around the 2016 timeframe. And I guess there was a pivotal paper, right, called
Hmm.
"Attention is All You Need."
Attention. Yep.
Yeah,
That's famous.
yeah, the
Famous or
famous
infamous? We
paper,
don't know.
infamous,
We'll find
famous.
out. We'll find out. We just suck all the power of the world. Yeah.
But it really was like,
Yeah.
I guess,
Yeah.
one of the papers that introduced this transformer architecture. So what are in your own words and kind of concept, what do you visualize this transformer architecture to be that's in this generative AI technology that's the big deal? Like, how do you think of that, and why do you think that's like a big going to be this big deal?
Um, I don't know if it's going to be, I mean, it seems to be a big deal right now. I'm going to be open, like honest, um, but I've been around long enough to know that, today's big deal, tomorrow, I don't know what the future are. I mean, there's obviously a lot of research being done on architectures, and, I'm sure that we're going to figure stuff out that's even better. Um, Most likely, I don't know. But like, I would look at it a little differently. I'm looking at it more from the point of view of like, I think we've jumped into the mainstream because, it's the mainstream consciousness. Because before, AI, well, AI was like this mysterious, like I don't know what that means, and I sometimes I wonder if I know what it means, to be honest with you. But like, it was like this really ambiguous, nerdy thing. And it's like the work you were doing, like you try to talk to like a civilian, so to speak. You're like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Like what, But like I think with Chat GPT in particular, which is it kind of crossed into the mainstream. So all of a sudden now, um, people saw, and I don't think ChatGPT or Chat UI is the killer app in our world, but it got to a point where people started using it and interacting with it, right? So they do ask you questions like, who's going to win the presidential election, which, also shows you that they don't quite understand what it really is. But regardless of that, I think what I'm excited about is that we've now are moving into like us regular people starting to see the value and kind of get excited about it. I do feel that the problem we have, this is what I'm kind of interesting to talk to you about, is like we as the AI industry, well, I focus, so, we focus on multiple AI. We're focusing on
Oh,
generative AI kind of stuff. So we're hardcore into that world of, you know, GPT and things like that. You focus on obviously a different piece of that, of the world. But we have, I think it's a user experience thing on the consumer side. So like that's why I'm excited about things like Apple Intelligence, things like that. By the way, but anyway, to answer your question, I think the bigger thing is more of like the fact that it's coming to the consciousness and people are really starting to be more open to having it as part of their lives. If that makes any sense. Um,
yeah, and I think
yeah.
ChatGPT, I mean, they deserve a lot of credit for that because that's really
Oh
what
yeah.
cracked it open, right? For
Yeah.
the general
Yeah.
populace, right? And now
A hundred
there's
percent.
a lot of clones and what
Yeah.
have
I
you.
mean,
But
there's like a lot of clones. There's a lot of different models. There's a lot of stuff like that. I mean, there's different technique retrieval techniques. I mean, people are starting to experiment. Like we're building a lot more around the software development life cycle. So a lot more stuff around obviously code. You mentioned code, um, code completion and code writers, things like that. We're starting to get more into um, techniques a little bit further than that. But like I think there's a lot of value there of like how do you, you know, for me personally, like we use it a lot. It's more for like how do I remove tedious work from my
yeah,
life. So I could focus on what humans are still creative and inventive. Like these things are not, maybe it's controversial, but I don't think so. I don't, they're not creative or inventive. They're, you know what I mean? Like we are, that's our thing for
right.
now. And I think it'll be for a long time. So like, can we use these tools to kind of help us get, focus on the things that matter to provide change. So
What
that
what
that's what, yeah,
well, people see it. They see Chat GPT because that is
yeah,
that has been their exposure,
yeah,
or maybe a tool like that, and they kind of ask it a question and they get a response,
yeah,
and then they hear, oh, this AI is a big threat, or it's going to be able to do all the things. They do see it being able to generate images and maybe
yeah,
some weird, still surreal video,
yeah,
somewhat
yeah,
hallucinogenic video.
yeah,
So they're seeing that, they're seeing its use, but let's talk about like a little bit about why it goes way beyond that because there's something underneath the hood that they don't see. That's just sort of the user interface that they see, that most people see. But
yeah,
there's something underneath the hood and a way that in ways that this can be applied that most people aren't exposed to and don't and can't really make the leap to why is this going to be a really big
yeah.
deal? It's not just going to be something that you just keep on asking questions of.
No, absolutely not. I think, and to unpack it, there's a lot more going on ChatGPT than GPT, so to speak. Um, the what's really exciting, and just so you know, you're starting to see like the latest, like, I don't know, it was kind of like felt like it came out like yesterday, I think, or where OpenAI released some of the new GT, some 4.0 models, that, are starting to do more reasoning, right? So like thinking about the answer, so we're all trying to get to the point of like, how do we make sure that the output from these systems, there's like, it's called faithfulness. Like, how do I know it's not hallucinating is not a
Right.
good thing. Even though like inherently, I mean, a trans, like a large language model is doesn't have context out of the box. Of it just it's essentially, I mean, the simplest way I can describe it is that it's really good at guessing the next words, right?
Right.
Based on what it's seeing, right? So that's hallucinating. So by nature, it's hallucinating. And if you want to talk about it, right, the key is to like give it enough context to make sure that what it does respond with is accurate, precise, faithful, all the stuff that you try to do on a machine. Like, for example, in a driving car, you want to make sure that it's pretty precise and what it's telling the car to do, right?
Yeah.
And so, to do that, you give it more at least in my world, there's techniques to give it context and even to have it sort of supervise itself, blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of stuff going on in these covers right now to make sure that it's giving you right answers, et cetera. We are also seeing it, and what we're getting excited about is using these techniques in traditional, I keep wanting to say the word traditional, but traditional like sort of workflows, right? So there's, the world of AI is not just a large language model, right? There's other things that we can do, and then and then putting these things within a series of models, for example, to process, I don't know, data, right? Because to build new interfaces for humans, right? Like be able to talk to my computer like as a human, it's not just a natural language thing. A language model can really help with that because it's really good at sort of like picking up and then translating that into a bunch of different options, stuff like that. So there's a lot of like really valuable things you can do with these models that go beyond just like a chatbot. That makes any sense, especially if
Hmm.
you use them within workflows. You and I even talked about using them to help, programs, and your systems, right? Like it's like really interesting use cases there around that. So
Yeah, and that's
eh,
where so
yeah,
with respect to these models, like
yeah,
precision, there is
yeah.
precision and the importance of accuracy and precision for like certainly
Mhm.
coding,
Yeah. Oh,
maybe
yeah.
like
Yeah.
you don't want it to produce something that's incorrect. But then on the flip side, there are those applications where it doesn't have to be precise. It could be more creative, like a more
Mhm.
creative, like image and video generation, and
Sure.
think the more creative arts side of maybe applications for this tool, right? Where it doesn't have to be precise. In fact, maybe that comes at a cost. It's like if you say give generate me an image of generate a painting called The Scream, right? And if
Yeah.
it generates the exact painting
Yeah.
from the screen, that's not going to be as interesting as something that might be more exciting where you say generate me The Scream but with a cat,
Yeah.
and it's got to be creative and it's going to blend in the cat and holding
Yeah. I
its
mean, to be
ears and
fair, I mean, that's all you can control that, like a temperature or whatever. I mean,
temperature. Yeah.
yeah,
Describe temperature real quick. What's
it,
temperature?
it's basically like how, how it's almost like how precise should I get to the next tokens that are coming out, versus like not like probability wise, so like, or do I want to be a little more free? Like, so that I think if you want to get more creative, you drop that temperature down. Well, I'm using creative loosely, by the way, or do I want to be more like, would precise be the word? I don't know. I move it all the way up. So in other words, like, it's going to be like the probability that that token being the next token is going to be pretty freaking high versus like, I'm going to be a little more loosey goosey about what I pop on the other side of it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and it's
yeah,
not a linear path, right? Like so like you might
no,
say I want the temperature to be like point 0.1 and it's,
yeah,
and it's pretty precise. And then you say 2, it's just you're
yeah,
picking these numbers.
hmm,
And then it's a little bit more creative and then you go to like 2.1 and it's like psychedelic or something. It just
yeah, sort of. I mean, you can do that. There's other parameters too. I do think though, for like the consumer though, I don't know, like I'm really fascinated by how do we put these tools into workflows that we already do, but it kind of helps us get things done. And in other words, like almost like I shouldn't like. I think the biggest success is going to be like if like if my mom is using something and there's AI running in the background, she doesn't even know it. Right.
Right.
She's just delighted by the output of it. So that's what I'm fascinated about. And so like, like in my mind, like I'm a big Apple fan. I've been an Apple fan for a long time, subscribed to the cult jobs. And like, his idea of like, how do we make things uh, like you don't, if you just look at really good products, they don't really give the user a lot of choice, right? They kind of make a decisions for you. And I kind of feel like that's what I'm really into right now is like, how do we use these technologies within things that we're doing every day, like coding, for example, right? But then like they become part of the workflow. So I don't even realize that when I'm actually using it's like happening. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Like
No,
that's
I
that's
get
what
it.
I'm fascinated about. And that's where I think the exciting, that's where I'm getting excited about like the future of this stuff is like, I think we're starting to get to a point now where the technology, because there's a lot of stuff we didn't have. Like in the 80s, we sure as heck didn't have, well, a lot of data as much as we have today. We'd have the internet, right? We didn't have compute power like we have today, even though it's insane. But like, so we're at a point, I think now in human history where we kind of have all the things to kind of really to do this stuff in a way that can help. I mean, help us, and obviously it could, like every technology, there's a there's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Um,
Well, yeah,
that's a whole
and I
that's a whole
and
nother discussion.
well, let's go there. Uh,
Yeah, let's go there. Yeah,
so
I'm
so
fascinated. I'm a
what?
nerd. I'm like, let's bring it on. Let's do it. But like
Let's bring it on. Yeah,
let's bring
there's
it
no
on.
like
Yeah,
I don't what I don't get, and I'm still trying to
yeah,
figure it out.
yeah.
I mean, I obviously understand as anybody in any sort of technology field or just any human being understands that technology can be used for good and bad things. It's just
Yeah,
gonna, whatever. You can
yeah.
use a hammer to hammer in a nail into a wall, or you can crack
It's called
someone's
human nature, and this is
yeah,
a tool. And
right,
humans are really good at building houses and doing other terrible things with hammers. So like it's
right.
yeah,
It's
well
so
horrible.
it's gonna happen, right? So in
Yeah,
fact, there are movies about it. Um, and so I've heard
yeah,
from like Elon Musk that
yeah.
we hear from Elon Musk this existential risk. Like, are
Hmm.
they thinking that these things are just gonna, like, launch, like, nuclear warheads or something? I
Yeah,
mean, you
yeah,
obviously you have to make that physical connection first, so if you don't
yeah,
make that physical connection, is there really a
yeah,
risk, right? Like, you wouldn't put a three-year-old in front of, um, a
yeah.
nuclear the nuclear
Button.
warhead
Yeah,
controls, and you may not put the AI in front of it either. So,
right.
like, what is the risk? What's the
That
existential risk?
I don't have the answer to that because I I'm not smart enough to think at that level. I'm no Elon Musk. I don't think of it that way. I don't think that's at least not in my lifetime that Skynet's going to happen. I'm not losing sleep on that one. But where I can lose, well, I'm not losing sleep anyway, but like where I can lose sleep, might be more around, and I don't know, like around more of like, it is a transformative technology. It will affect, what jobs people do and how people do. That's, I think, more realistic, more down to like what we're talking about right now. Like where I think the risks are, is one of like, you know, like automation, you deal with it all the time. If you can automate something, there used to be a human. There used to be a human that ran the elevator for heaven's sakes. Like there was a guy in the elevator that would take you to your floor. Like that guy's gone. That kind of thing. Like, I think those are the kind of things to be thinking about from a policy point of view. Like, what are people doing for jobs, right? I
Yeah,
think that like with every technology, I think there's going to be a shift in jobs. I can't tell you what those are, but I feel there's going to be something there. Um, yeah, and the other thing I think we should be thinking about is, around the world, around the idea, around the important concepts of like, how do I make sure that these chat bots, for example, or these things that we're building, are not biasing towards a certain thing, right? Like, so like, they're not, you know, biasing towards race or sex or or going off the rails into like the God knows where. Those are really important things because or that they're inclusive of society, humans, right, as a society, as opposed to like one group or another, which it's very easy to do when you start looking at, and, like certain data sets. So I think those are the kind of things that I'm more concerned about versus like the machine taking over and, putting I mean, maybe it already has, maybe we are the matrix. I don't know, but like, I'm not quite as concerned on that one. So I'm more concerned about like,
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
we as humans responsibly use this technology? And it will be used by people for things that are not great. I mean, I think that's a human nature question, a human, like question of, like technology and, we're really good at acting each other up, which is sad, but you know, I'll just do my best to make sure that the stuff that I build doesn't do this. So yeah,
Well, also, maybe as we learn more, you get access to more information and knowledge. It actually improves
oh, you do,
sort of the
yeah,
the, the human the human capacity for not being, hopefully, as horrible. So the existential risk problem, like for humanity, which is what some Elon Musk's and the likes of the world
yeah,
have been sort of worried about with this technology. You can imagine if you connect this technology with something, the physical world, something robotic. Of course, I think of autonomous vehicles, but not just
right,
autonomous vehicles, robotics, something robotic in general. That robot can
right,
go out and do something crazy if you're letting this AI. But this new AI, this new generative
yeah,
AI can be used different and applied differently. Whereas like the AI where you're just hooking up you're training a neural network and you're teaching it how to like control something. If something goes
yeah,
wrong, you can't like look at the weights in the neural network and figure out by looking at all these numbers what the heck went wrong. But if you use generative AI to generate like human readable code that is now
hmm,
controlling the machine and something goes wrong, you can actually look at the code and maybe
yeah,
figure out the error. So it
yeah.
actually may be ultimately kind of a safer or a better application for AI moving forward because you can verify and validate it easier.
That's
More,
dude, I never actually thought about it that way. That's actually, I like that. That's actually does make a lot of sense. And like one thing I've seen, and I saw it at the NVIDIA conference, a gentleman named Jim Fan, he's one of their like top researchers, really, really, again, these are all, what I love about this industry is like, there's a lot of really much smarter people than I just get to play in the same sandbox occasionally. Um, um, but the way they train their robots, right, is really having a generative AI system. Like, here's the problem, or here's like what I need you to do in a task or whatever it is, right? And then the generative AI will create a series of code because you know what it's really good at is good at spitting out code. Like it's actually really good at that.
mhm.
And then it'll take that code and it'll like have different versions of that, so call it a policy, whatever you want to call it, and then it'll run it. It's going to execute code right in a safe environment, and then they basically use a reinforcement for a learning kind of thing. It's like which one's working the best. And then when they get the best one, they save that, quote unquote policy. And it's done. So then you could look at that code and see what it's doing. Um, I never thought about that actually. I like it. Now I can't
Yeah,
tell you
yeah. I mean,
what the model is doing, like what the, when it's, when you use an LLM, that's pretty hard to tell you what it's thinking. But there's techniques to figure that out.
yeah,
Got
it
you.
could spit out complete garbage, but you can at least look
Yeah.
at it and maybe
Yeah.
correct it because you got a chance of being able
Yeah.
to be able to do that. It's producing something that you can see and understand,
Yeah.
versus numbers in
Yeah.
a neural network.
Yeah, yeah, which is
Interesting.
gobbledygook achievements. Yeah, I like that. But that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's how they teach their robots. I mean, obviously there's probably more to it, but that's the technique that they use. That's really fascinating.
Take it to the next level is that you can not only ask it to produce code, right? But maybe you can ask it to produce code that's more human readable and more verifiable and validatable. Maybe it knows how to do that versus if you tell a regular programmer to do that, they might not do it right. So or the code might
yeah.
not be as readable.
Yeah, I mean, totally
So,
could do that.
there's that. Like,
You could refactor it. We're doing it right now. We're using it like ourselves at Multiply AI. We do a lot of code generation from models. Like like one of our, like with some of the tools that we're using. We even have agents, we call them agents, AI agents that we'll do like when we do a pull request, which is like when you have a piece of code, you want to put it into the code base, you kind of submit it into like a review process, so to speak. And then, someone on the team will go through it. Um, we actually have an AI agent that actually will code review it. And it's really fascinating because, we're still working on it. Um, but out of the box, it was actually okay. It was, I wouldn't say like accept everything, but it got us thinking, right? Like it would say something like, "Oh, wait, I didn't even think about that." Um, but it would describe what was going on. So there's a lot of really neat things it could do. Where even if the code's unreadable to you, you could ask it, "What is this thing doing?" And it'll be able to tell you what it's
Right.
doing. Right. So I think there's a lot of techniques there that are really fascinating. I think and we're starting to do a lot of that ourselves. Not only us, I mean, a lot of the coding communities using these tools, but we're personally using these to make our lives better. I mean, I don't know, like how many if statements do I want to run in my life? Like if it can help me knock some of that stuff out, it's awesome, you know?
And what I think a lot of people may also not realize is you can tell it to take some piece of code that's available, be it open source or whatnot, or
Yeah.
something from a colleague,
Yeah.
and say, provide comments for this, and there may be libraries or other code modules that it's referencing that you're not familiar with, and it can figure out what those are, these
Yeah.
third party libraries, and tell you in the code. So it's a great
Yeah.
sort of way to kind of learn what a piece of code is actually doing, as you implied, but it can provide
Oh, it's a
comments for
great,
code.
it's a great tool. You can feed it, your company's code. That's what we're doing, so like it has context of like your styles, what you guys do or what we do. And by the way, we want to extend that out. Like what we're working on now is extending that out to, not just code, but like documents, right? So, you don't have to be a coder, for example. You could be like the lawyers, and you're able to, oh, I love lawyers. I don't mean that's probably came it all wrong. But like say you're looking at like a contract, and you can interact with that contract and you could ask it, what is this thing supposed to mean? Or like, where is this coming from? And it could go through different pieces of other, maybe it's other literature, maybe it's a past contract. I have no idea. Like almost the same sort of workflows that you're seeing like with code, but applied to like more like, other, what do you call it? Like, fields, right?
Right.
And it's really good with that. And I think that's really exciting. Like we want to do stuff like, and spill the beans here, but this is like what we're working on. It's sort of like as you interact with a document, there's a table. I could highlight that table and go put that, make that Excel or something, so I can go manipulate it or do something with these numbers. And it's almost like having a really smart intern that can get stuff done. So I think those are the kind of stuff that I get excited about. So it's like, yeah, is it like, Skynet taking over the world? No, it's just like a really smart intern that can help me, do my job and then maybe give me more time to actually do more high value things like solve real problems. I'm gonna keep
Well,
saying that
right now it's like a
for a while.
smart intern,
Yeah.
but the latest version of GPT AI that you alluded
Yeah.
to is
Yeah.
apparently able to solve problems,
Yeah.
that a physics PhD student could solve, right? So,
Yeah. It's good. It's going to get better, smarter, but it's just your intern will grow with your company, I guess, and get smarter and better. I don't know. I mean, um, hopefully we can apply that
so
to, solving cancer one day. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people are working on it. So we'll see.
that's right. But like the just going back to the document example, so you
Yeah.
can take a legal document and tell it to
Yeah.
brief you on this. Maybe tell
Yeah.
me some related, laws that apply,
Sure.
Delaware law or what have you that apply, and it can give you a pretty good response, but it can also, as you know, give you the wrong info. It can because
Well,
it's
yeah.
still hallucinating. It can give you. So how do you check against that? I guess, what do you do?
I mean, those are so, I mean, ChatGPT out of the box, I wouldn't be taking legal advice from that. Um, because it's very generalized. But we have a lot of techniques now where we're giving more context to the model. And you can even have models supervise other models, like it's kind of meta.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of techniques to do now that we're getting, hallucinations are as they get smarter, faster, and we have techniques, like that's gonna go away. I'm gonna tell you right now, that's not gonna be a
Right.
problem. I mean, right? I'm
No,
not
no,
saying
no.
that it's not. Yeah,
Understood.
yeah,
Understood.
yeah, yeah. I think the bigger parts are. I mean, then you have the other questions of like, where to train these models. You're pulling in data that someone's created, and it's a whole other world of synthetic data we could talk about, which is even more mind blowing. But like, but the other challenge now is like, if I include something, there's a whole copyright issues. It's all of these topics that honestly I'm not equipped to even begin to answer.
So,
Yeah.
uh, in fact, Multiply AI, is there anything you can tell, like, without spilling the beans too much, like what you're doing there, like what the vision and the goals are for the company and
Yeah, I
where you're
mean,
going with that?
it's pretty simple. Yeah, it's pretty simple. I took some time off because I was in between things, and I'm been fortunate enough where I could do that. And but I was thinking about where I was happiest professionally. I'm very like happy when I love being part of a small team of really smart people solving problems in technology. Obviously, that's where I live. I'm fascinated about AI still, Gen AI especially. And so I kind of like wanted to kind of almost like rebuild a part of my career where the company was not huge, because I've been through that, but it was like a small company of smart people solving problems. And that's what I'm doing, right? That's what we're doing, right? At Multiply AI. And we're focused on finance because we are, a couple of reasons. One, it's a fascinating place to build this technology in. Second, the customers that we're starting to work with, um, and more open to trying these new technologies, because these are like leaps of faith in an interesting way, right? Like these are not proven. You're taking a chance here, right? It's like if you and I are like, let's build a blog app, like it's pretty safe. Like we know how to do that, right? People have done that, but we're talking about like building things that no one's done or very few people have done. And so they seem much more excited about taking those chances. And so we're doing that. So we're starting out with like, really secure like coding, kind of software development lifecycle projects, because that sort of makes sense. It's something that paradigm is trying to develop around. And now we're diving deeper into the world of, what we call multimodal kind of approaches, right? Like, so like, it's not just text anymore. It's like processing images, like there's all these different things you can do. And we're trying to build, uh, better systems at, data processing, I guess you could say, document processing, things like that. Um, so that's what we're working on. I mean, the vision is to build the best team that we can build in Charlottesville, Virginia, to solve these problems that we're coming across. If we come across a product one day, which everybody wants us to do, and I'm just like, maybe, um, we'll do it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep solving problems in our industry, which is finance. So yeah,
So it
it's
can
simple. I wish it
without
was a bigger
without
vision, other than being like Michael Prichard wants to work with smart people.
without can you, without
Yeah.
divulging anything like or too much, can you give like a simple example for like how you like what's solving a finance problem mean? Like I can kind of get it for other.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it's um, we, like we're like one of our customers is much more sensitive on where their data goes, right? We didn't talk about that, and so like if I copy and paste something in ChatGPT, where does that go? Who has access to it? Most likely, I'm sure they don't care, but do they care? Like you have to think about where you're putting stuff, right? And so they're very sensitive to that because it's their IP, like and for these folks, they can't use a lot of public tools. They can't use third party tools because they have sensitive data and IP in there and algorithms, things like that. So they've hired us but to back up, but they know that these like coding tools, coding copilots, these internal tools that people are using are going to be very beneficial based on the data to their team. So if we can help their team, get to a better algorithm, for example, blah, 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 that equates to what they call alpha, and alpha is what their business is about. And so if we can help streamline and empower and augment those teams to be able to find, that one piece of code that you wrote 20 years ago in some obscure library in your 1,000 repositories, for example, that's worth a lot to them. So we actually, for them, we're essentially building a custom, it's a bespoke, and this has to be on-prem. So we're actually running on our own hardware, a coding Copilot, right? So that's an example of what we're doing, and
I
it's
see.
value. Yeah. So it's very valuable to them from the point of view of like, it helps us, yeah, it helps augment their team, obviously, back to what we originally talked about. But it's theirs. Like that, it doesn't even like, there's no internet access in that data center, by the way. So we literally are running, these like open source models, actually, like Meta's Llama. Yeah, I can talk about that, like Llama models,
Llama
3.1
3
models, and
or
stuff like that. Yeah, Llama 3.1, 8B, and 70B. And then, we're starting now to go down the line of, they use some languages that are they're not Python, for example, which have more support. And so we're now starting to kind of even get around the world of fine tuning our own small models
Mhm.
for this, which is really interesting. Yeah, so that's the kind of work we do. We kind of, things that, we're really good at integrate. We're engineers, so we integrate, right? We're not doing like massive research, we just integrate. So we can help you actually get products done like that.
Gotcha, gotcha. And so what kind of like, are you, I guess you're looking at some beefy hardware for the training, right? Um,
Yeah. It's right now we're on the A100 Series 89, and now we're talking about, good hoppers, things like that. But it's a very
can you,
unique
can you,
use
can
case.
you're speaking a different language for me and,
Oh,
and some others.
yeah.
A100. So in NVIDIA,
A100. Yeah, NVIDIA. So GPUs, just like
yeah,
GPU architectures. Um, um, you know, w- as you know, these are math intensive operations, right? You're essentially, that's
yeah.
what they do. And so that's why graphical processing units, were developed originally for graphics, and they're very, you know, calculation heavy kind of things. It happened to fit really nicely with the stuff that we're doing in at least this sort of AI world, math. And so NVIDIA right now is the leader in that world of providing the hardware, right? The GPUs and things like that. And so we're on a series of, but they have different architectures. So like, the A100s, H100, H200, like, they just get bigger, better, faster. And so, we're kind of moving up now. We're going to a much faster, more powerful machine to give us more performance.
So the 8100 is the model, and then the like one of the models.
The,
But
the
like, so
A100s are the
these
GPUs
what?
that we're using. The models are like
Mhm.
Llama 3, like Meta's Llama 3.1, 8B, the 8 billion parameter, 70B is 70 billion
Got it.
parameter. So like these are what's the parameter billion? It's like what it was trained with, kind of thing. And they have a give or take. So we kind of interchange, our system can interchange based on like, we don't just do one model, like based on what's happening, the system is smart enough to figure out like what's, as part of the series, like who do I need to talk to, so to speak? Because they each have performance, like there's like different give what do you call it? I'll say pros and cons, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's, you sort of have to weigh out, like, to get good performance, I may need to maybe go to a faster model, but that faster model may not be as accurate, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I guess I meant model of computer, but I got it on the LLM models
Oh yeah,
side. What you're
sorry.
referring to, but
Yeah.
for no,
Yeah, when
no,
you say
but
models in
like,
my
so
world, I just
are these
immediately go to
compute
that. Yeah.
make and model? Yeah, the these computers though, these are not your $4,000 gaming systems, right? These are like
Yeah.
how expensive are these
No,
computers?
I mean, the one that we're right now deployed on is like $62,000 for this one. I mean, and you start getting the bigger players, you're like 100, 200,000 plus dollars.
Right.
These are expensive. They're not cheap. And then that's not even the machine. I mean, that's just the machine. Like, you're talking
Right.
about, you gotta have it somewhere. So it's in a data center. It's got like dual power supplies. It's sucking, tons of energy because it's stuff, it's hot. So you got the cooling system. So, it's expensive, you know, uh,
Yeah.
you know, unfortunately. It's also energy intensive, which is not, doesn't make, it's like something we have to, as human species, to figure out. Um, Especially with these big, I mean, I don't, like I don't know why we're talking about Elon Musk again, but like, they're putting 100,000 H100s live, right? Like that's,
Right.
they're about, I forget who's about to do it, but they're about $225 billion data like centers are coming up online. Like there's huge energy and power, and like it's a huge thing about to hit the world, and
Yeah.
I hope it's worth it. With these models. But
Well,
yeah,
there's convergence. There's convergence from other industries and like, how are you going to power these things in the future? And but
right.
like I think if Moore's law still applies, maybe this 100,000, so it's interesting to project
Yeah.
forward this $100,000, platform in 10 years will be
Yeah.
something that's,
Oh, yeah.
affordable in the home. And what does that mean? What does that mean at that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
for
Well,
for
I
for
think you're also
people?
like what I'm excited about is we've also been experimenting with and I think it comes from my app days, like our app, like my app days literally on the phone, right? Um we've been like if you like I'm about to after this call, sorry, this podcast, I'm gonna pre-order my new iPhone because I'm really excited about it. Um um But, it's starting there's these devices, like your computers are starting to come with hardware and sort of built for this. And so I think you're gonna start and we're experimenting with this too, where we're building, like like little I call them single person. I'm not a marketer, so just forgive me. I call them single purpose apps. It's like experimenting where like you can like double click a thing on your desktop and it does something for you, but there's AI running in the background. But we're not like hitting open AIs APIs. We're like hitting small models that are just built for a certain task on your device itself. So you're actually running it on hardware on your device. I'm really fascinated by that. So I think you're going to see, to your point, one of the things that are going, if Moore's law is, holds true, which I think it's going to. Um, it's going to get faster, cheaper, better. But also that you're going to see more of your devices sort of have built-in capability to do this stuff. It already has. Like I mean, it already could do it. So yeah, it's definitely going to get better, faster, cheaper. But right now we're at a stage that if you want to run your own stuff in your own data center, you're dropping some serious bucks. You know?
Yeah. It dawns on me. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. We've both dealt with,
Yeah.
and we continue to deal with, work, and we want to work with great teams and hiring people,
Yeah.
and and you know, I guess like back in the day, one person can only do so much. So you have a team of smart people doing something. But as we move forward with this
Hmm.
technology, especially as these $100,000, computers that are doing massive work right now can do that same amount of work 10 years from now for what you can, put
Hmm.
in your home or right by your desk. It seems like we're going to have like our own sort of augment, each person will have sort of, they'll have their own workforce. They'll have like ten other
Hmm.
developers sitting next to them in
Yeah.
a machine that's doing something, maybe not certainly at entry level programming, maybe mid level programming level,
Mhm.
doing things, and that would have taken just a massive team, or just a team of
Yeah.
people. And so we'll see more, maybe, will that, benefit the entrepreneurial landscape and the birth of new companies, because now one person or two people can do a lot more with, an AI computer by their
Oh,
side, right?
I mean, it's already happened even, before AI. I mean, remember in like our day, to start a company, a garage, remember the days you had to set up your own servers, your own HTML, your own web servers
Of
and,
course,
like
yeah,
blah, blah,
yeah,
blah. And we had like, so like, it was hard. It took time, it took money, it took effort. And now like you and I can fire up a company with like one SaaS product in like an afternoon, because like it's there, right? I don't need to, I don't, like
Right.
I can't remember last time I've screwed around with Apache's, web server configs, right? Like it's never anymore. So, um, I think that we are in a period of time where these tools, and they're doing it right now, like these generative tools, these AI tools, um, like anyone can program now, anyone can design now, and yeah, I agree 100%. I think there's two parts to what you just said. One is like folks can like build like, one, two people could build what, obviously like what was took a lot more back in the day. And I think that's 100% true today. I mean, there's like check out tools like, VO from Vercel. Like you literally can prompt an interface that writes code. That's insane, beautiful interface. Drop it into say
What's it called?
Cursor,
What's it called? I'm sorry.
VO by Vercel,
Via.
VER. Yeah.
Okay.
VO, like I think it's V0 technically, but called VO by Vercel. Vercel is a awesome platform for deployment, stuff like that. And then, so you can build this interface, drop that into like, like a Cursor or something like that. Cursor has its own co-pilots, and they literally prompt like code, and it'll actually write the code. You can run it right there. Like you don't need a much to do this stuff anymore. And that's and then there's like, APIs for everything, just about, right? Like I don't, if I need a phone system, there's an API for that. If I need, whatever, so it's an awesome time to be an entrepreneur, I think, because you can do things from your laptop for very cheap to see if you can provide a service or whatever that people actually want. Um, Also, what I think is interesting, you mentioned like have a workforce that's on your computer. Like, I think that's definitely where we're going. I think, like you're going to get into the world of, we call them ingenics systems, like, AI agents. So in other words, these little like, it's called pieces of code that have autonomy. Like they can log it. Like we've already done this ourselves at Multiply. Yeah, we have agents, and this is our experimentation, full disclosure, where I can go, what is, go get my tire bill. And that's all we tell it. I'm at Virginia Dominion, go download my power bill. It will actually literally fire up a browser, go to Google, type in Virginia, go to the login page of Dominion, figure out what the email login is, ask me what's your creds. I give it my creds. It like fills in the blanks, logs into the site, navigates itself to the bill, downloads it. Like we have that already. It's crazy. And all we said is go do it, and it figures it out. Happy to share that. It's we have a video on it. It's really cool stuff. But like the idea there is like, beyond just code, think about having like, your executive assistants or whatever. Like I need a flight, I'm going to a business trip, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is like, cool, I got you. And it'll actually,
Yeah.
interact with you, and it'll actually go do it. It'll log into Delta and book the flight. It'll do all the stuff that you need it to do. And that's all going to be running on your machine. Like, I think that's all you're going to see a lot more of that coming
Oh
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. I mean, certainly the things like that, and I guess I was referring to also just like being able to start companies with this. And
Yeah.
yes, yeah, there are a lot of tools that are make it easier. That of course make it easier to do that today versus 10 years ago. But with this, it could be like just a new thing. It could be that anybody who has the ability to purchase the equivalent of a in the future $2,000
Yeah.
compute platform will be able to do quite a bit. Um, and
A
this
MacBook
kind of goes
Pro.
to
Done.
education too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The MacBook version 50 or whatever. But
Yeah. I mean, you could do it
but
now. I mean, I have an M3 chip. That thing is like, I could run Llama 8B on this laptop. I can run 70B, but it's slow as hell, but it can be done. It's
yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
yes, yes. And but like so this kind of goes to education too. Like you just talked about some things that you can do, and when I talk to this is happening so fast. There are certain people who are very like, yeah, I'm, certainly still skeptical about it because it
Yeah.
hallucinates and it does weird things. Um, and I kind of worry that kids aren't going to be, taught this to leverage these tools. Um, I'm
Mhm.
teaching my own to kind of like leverage the tool appropriately, but I know there's a lot of like
Yeah.
skepticism and uncomfort with using the tools, but I think these tools are going to be key to be able
Mhm.
to, just do things in your life
Yeah.
that are just going to make you, much more productive and happy maybe. And I think
Yeah.
there's some discouragement there. So I'm wondering, like, when are schools going to be teaching kids this technology? Is that
Yeah.
going to happen, or is there just going to be this big impediment? And then also disparity, because some schools will be against it, and others just won't have the tools to teach the kids because of economics and what have you. And I just kind of
Yeah.
worry about that. I think
Yeah.
kind of maybe there should be some more um, readily available educational tools out there for kids and teachers to leverage, and I don't know if it's there yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I see it in my kid's school, right? As an I'm not an educator, but as an educator, I could, I do feel, you know, like, I'll talk from a coder, like a software engineer, just since I can speak to that. Like, I can have something write quote unquote code for me, even run it. Oh, it works. But I would, if I was bringing someone on board as a software engineer, I would want them to know what is going on with the covers, right? So I want to educate them on, like, don't maybe initially don't use these tools. Like, let's actually learn how to write code and all those things. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
an important thing. But then once you kind of like you understand that, then by all means use the tools because they will accelerate your life. At least you can see it and you can know, like, you have an education around, like, is it right? Is it not right? How do I make this work, kind of thing. And so I think the same should be applied to education of you should still know how to write, you should still be educated on how to add and multiply, things like that.
Well,
But but I
and
think you should definitely also be educated on, like, how do I use these tools and how do I use these tools properly? Because they're going to be
right.
everywhere, you know? I think that technology in general, like how to use technology in general is a thing. Now, the good news is our kids are growing up fully digitally native. Like, and so, like you and I grew up sort of like in between digitally native, right? Like we sort of in the world of analog and digital, and
Yeah.
they're like completely digital. So I'm not too worried about them on that side. It's just I think from an education point of view, I still think you need to understand basics, right? Now you can use the tools
S-
to teach that. That's cool too, right? And maybe use the tools to be more adaptive. I think that's interesting too, from a concept of like, not everybody learns the same. I mean, I certainly don't learn the same. I struggled to, like, school was not my thing because I just don't learn that way. I'm a different. I don't, you know, it's not that I'm less intelligent. It's just like I have a different way. So it'd be interesting that I can't get off
yeah.
topic. I apologize. It'd be interesting to like see these tools being used more of like, could they help maybe even craft, programs or curriculums that are built for like more like personalizing that education for me, right? Or for some kid that,
Yeah.
that'd be interesting as well.
Yeah, I get that, and I guess kind of thinking of this in terms of programming. You're saying
Yeah.
it's important to use this tool, but then to know kind
Yeah.
of maybe programming, because how's it working on? But how many generations back do you go? Because when
Yeah.
people were using higher level programming languages, you had like back in when we were getting started, maybe in the certainly the 80s
Yeah.
and 90s and programming people, we I would still be interacting with engineers who would stress the importance of knowing um what do you call it, assembly code works, right?
Assembly. Yeah. I remember those
Right, because
days.
it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, hey, you have to know how assembly code works, because
Yeah.
if you have a problem with the high level programming language, you may have to drop down to
Yeah.
assembly code. Well, now
Yeah.
there's no way in hell anybody's dropping down to assembly code. And likewise, obviously in the future, at some point, these tools are going to be somewhere where it's like you're just not going to have to drop down to the source, to the Java or the Python or the whatever source code level, because it's
Yeah.
just doing. stuff for you,
Yeah.
right? But that
That's a
transition will
fair
happen.
statement. No, no.
We're just climbing the
Yeah, no, that's a
levels.
fair statement. Yeah, and we're doing it now in programming. You're 100% right. Like but I still think that, like understanding basic concepts in computers. If you're gonna be a computer scientist, I think it's still important. But maybe I'm just old. I don't know. I just, you know, maybe abstraction layers change, but like I still think it's kind of important, to know what is really happening. Um, but I just don't think you need to like go program assembly, God forbid. But like understanding like how a computer works is kind of important, I think. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm an educator. I mean, I think, knowing how to write, I think is important. Um, reading, things like that.
Sure.
So you got to teach that. Um, um, but I do agree with you. I do, I think we're going to figure out, we have to figure out how to like use these tools. Like this is going to be part of their life. There's nothing we can do. I mean, that's going to happen. It's already happening.
Right.
I'd be curious to like if someone did
Yeah.
a
I mean,
course in high school that's like, like we are using these tools. Like this is part of the course. That'd be really interesting to see what that looked like from a curriculum point of view.
yeah. Well, shifting gears for a minute here, like, um, just talking about entrepreneurism and starting companies. Um, and I guess we'll throw another, it's not a quote, but another tale from Elon Musk out is
Yeah.
I think he likened it to starting up companies is to like sometimes chewing on glass, right? It can be very painful. There's a lot of painful
Yeah.
experiences. There's stories of him sleeping under his desk, and we all have stories. So I mean, like, what are
Mhm.
like some what are your thoughts on what it's like what it can be like, starting a company and overcoming like
Yeah.
certain severe obstacles, and what gets the kind of entrepreneur past that point? And when do you know
Yeah.
to hold them and when do you know to fold them? Kenny
That's good.
Rogers.
That's the, yeah, that's the $1 billion question, literally. Um, uh, the, the, so what's it like? It's hard. I mean, I didn't try to do out the F bomb today, but I will. And and it's just anything in life. I think everything is hard, right? I mean, anything you want to pursue in life is hard. Um, you know, Starting a company, it's a leap of faith. Like you have to really believe in what you're doing. Um, because at the end of the day, it's going to get tough. And there'll be those days where you're just like, you gotta persevere. Because I promise you, stuff's not. What's that quote? Like everybody has a plan, so you're punched in the face. I think it's like a Mike Tyson thing. And the thing with entrepreneurs is like you just get constantly punched in the face, and so you just gotta keep pushing forward. I don't know. I find it rewarding, and I don't know. I mean, maybe you have to be a certain type of personality to do this because it is painful, but it's also like awesome, right? Like, especially when when you have like when you figure something out or, even the journey is, I think, exciting. Like, like doing stuff that no one's done before, having to, be resourceful. Like, holy shit, we're running out of money. How do I make this work? We all get the stories. I mean, you got them, I got them. I mean, everyone I know that's done this has got the stories of like, holy shit, if that didn't happen, I would have lost it all. That kind of thing. I mean, I don't know if you have that, but I've had that a few times in my career. Um, yeah, it's tough. I don't know if that's, advising someone. I mean, I'm a big encourager of it. I think everyone should try it or do it. I also think that, it's not if it doesn't work out, which most likely it's not. I mean, no offense. I've had failures. Yeah, I'm sure you fail too, right? It happens all the time. But it's everyone should try it. It's not. I don't know. I don't know if it's like chewing on glass. But it's definitely hard.
Right, right. Well, I think, and also
But it's hard.
every
I don't know.
I guess
Yeah.
it's not talked about. I mean, everyone talks about the, the money and how, you've either got to
Yeah.
raise money or you got to get revenue,
Yeah.
it's one or
Yeah.
the other. Investing your own money, but and then very often you're dealing with customers who have,
Yeah.
funds that are, much larger than your pot of funds, right? So their expectations
Yeah.
can be different from what a company's able to deliver depending on the stage of the company, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
so managing expectations with customers as a startup,
Yeah.
can be, in a new
Well,
space, in a new field, can be
yeah.
difficult.
Well, 100%. Like I said, it's all hard. But like, companies have different stages. Like early, like even where like Multiply Eyes right now, we're like 7 people. We're not a big company, but we're pitching some whales. And it's like, and they're like, "Who the hell are you guys?" It's like, so like you got like, so there's different, like, but that's a different kind of person, different kind of group of people that do that. And then when you become bigger, then you get a different kind of people. And then when you become 1,000 person company, you're a different group of people. But like a startup at this stage, you're gonna have to fight. You're just gonna have to grind. I guess the best way. It's grinding. I think I'm gonna describe it as grinding. You're just grinding until like you get that, either you get a polished thing at the end or it breaks. I don't know what to say. Like, and then when you like, when you get out, I think that's, sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you just run out of money and it's like, that's that, someone else makes a choice for you, the market or you personal thing, right? Like been there. Like I have a bad habit though, where like I'll keep going and I might keep going maybe a little longer than I should have gone. But I think that's also part of like who we are as entrepreneurs, right? Like you don't quit, like you just keep pushing until you get to what you want. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but
No, I think
sometimes it
that's
just
called
doesn't.
persistence and grit, so that's not a bad thing.
There's another layer to this, which I did the quote unquote grind. I think something else that I'm not sure people talk about in our world. First of all, I think there's a bad thing that's happened in technology, especially where like we praise the raising of money. Like that seems to be like a badge of honor. Look, I've raised, $150 million at $1 billion valuation, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, and I think everyone kind of like everybody I talked to like started code, like, I need to raise money and I need to do this, like, and to me, it's like, I don't think that's the right way to teach our young entrepreneur. I think we need to be thinking about like, let's build a business, man. Like, and if you can build a business, if you can bootstrap it, awesome. If you need capital, great. But like it shouldn't be like a badge of honor to raise money. It should be a badge of honor to build a business. And so I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between the reality of that and all that. By the way, also you mentioned money. Do not get into this world if you want to make money. It is freaking hard. And as that is your like, like I want to become rich by building a company, go become an investment banker. Do something else. Like that, you know, like it's hard. And and
Sure.
you know, and so there's that piece. And then the other piece, one more piece that I think we don't talk about, which I struggle with is, and I'm working through it. And I would imagine we could have a whole other podcast on this if you were open to this. But it's really the emotional side, for me at least, the emotional toll that is taken to do these things, right? To build a company on me personally, on my family, right? I mean, I was on the road every week. I didn't see my kid, like it was crazy. Like, the idea of like the stress is like how do that, like it's bad enough when it's just you, but imagine having like 300 employees or 300 team members that rely on you, their families rely on you to make sure you make payroll, or even 10, team members. I mean, that's like that is emotionally, I think, more difficult than the economic part, to be honest with you, for me personally. And I don't think we talk about those things about when it comes to this world that we
Oh,
live in, right? Everybody
100%.
talks, everybody talks about like, look at Elon Musk, he's a billionaire. Or look at, whatever, they just sold their company. Oh my God. But like to get there and the stress emotionally and all that stuff. And I don't know, man, that's so like, I think if you're gonna, like, what you should do is you should have a passion, a dream, try it, go for it. But like, it's a grind, but it's also going to be like, be prepared. It's just not easy. So, so anyway, I'm going to stop there. I just went on a rant. So I apologize.
No, that's a good rant, and that could be a whole
Yeah.
episode, but, like, there could be, like, tears and stuff on that one, so that
Oh,
was
I got
'cause it
stories,
is
man.
it's draining, yeah.
Yeah,
It
I got
can be,
stories.
um
I love this topic. I mean, I have high respect for people that you know do this stuff. And I just say, I never like if people tell me their ideas and all that. Like, I may have an opinion, but I never judge people. I'm like, go, like, awesome. Like, like you're doing something you're passionate about. I don't know. It may work, it may not, but go
yeah.
for it.
Well, I think the tool like I said, to some extent, taking it back to generative AI, some of
Yeah,
these tools are gonna make some of these pain points, go away and easier, right? Not go away completely, but you're just gonna be able to do
yeah,
things,
faster,
um, faster, you're gonna be able to
fail
produce
faster.
produce
Yeah,
press releases without hiring the
yeah.
marketing person right away.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, even like being able to test ideas, like concepts faster, fail faster kind of mindsets. Like I think like the days, like, I mean, unless you're like, building a whole new, like, I'm going to train the latest large language models or whatever. And I need to raise $5 billion. I think, that's a rare thing. Most people like, you know, it used to cost a lot of money, like, getting servers, doing it, blah, 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 like now, like, dude, like you and I get fired, but there's like forgot the name of the site. I'm trying to remember. I love this place. You can create landing pages, like pretty advanced, like landing pages, and it's $19 a year. It's amazing. They can like test stuff out, like, you could like, I could build like a simple app pretty quickly now for cheap. I mean, heck, Vercel, which I'm not related. I don't have any stock in this company. Like I can deploy like a hobby project on there, and it's like fully working. Like say it's like fully working node site or whatever, and it's free. You
Wow.
know, I
Yeah.
mean, it's so it's like I don't know. It's a pretty exciting time. But the other part of
Well,
entrepreneur, I got one other idea there, but like that's like looking at companies, like looking at businesses that are not just pure technology. I think there's a huge opportunity in um like the more like localized services kind of work. Um,
what do you
things that
mean?
the
Like, what's like localized service?
plumbers, HVAC, people come to your house servicing. Like I think we overlook those opportunities. I think you can build some really great businesses in that world, especially now that like I think there's a transition happening. So it doesn't have to be like the next great app. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, there's just a whole thread that we could talk about with
Yeah.
entrepreneurism, but I mean, and then what it's like being an entrepreneur in Charlottesville, Virginia versus Silicon Valley, right? Like,
Oh God,
we
don't get me
all, we,
started. East
well,
Coast versus West Coast, like the whole conversation there. Yeah.
well, it's not even East Coast. It's like,
Yeah.
it's Charlottesville,
Charlottesville.
it's,
Yeah.
it's,
I mean,
it's, uh, anything but, East Coast is not New York City. I mean, we're not talking about
er,
New York City or DC. We're
yeah,
talking
that's
about
fair.
like being
Charlottesville.
somewhere where it's there's just not that ecosystem
Yeah.
that there is in these
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah.
But to some extent, I do think it's changing a little bit. I mean, I don't know if you read The Rise of the Rest from Steve Case. It's
No,
a
I've never, I've heard of, I've never actually read it, but yeah.
pretty pretty good. I'm not sure I actually honestly finished the whole thing, but I read I have it and I read
Yeah.
through it, and definitely good. But especially now, I think with again these tools, you're going to see more of that, more you know folks in different locations being able to do more because they have these basically
Yeah.
workforce tools at their disposal that they didn't have before
No,
via
yeah,
AI.
you've seen that already. Yeah, you've seen that already. I mean, I'm in Charlottesville because I made a conscious choice to be here because I like, the area. I didn't make the choice because it's like, this is going to be the entrepreneur business decision that I need to make. Cause, honestly, I came here in 2004, started my first company. I literally got here in 2004, 2005. And yes, it's changed, but you're here. It's not, definitely not New York. Let alone San Francisco. And it's gotten better, sure, but I don't know. But I don't know. Like, I mean, I've done all right, like, and it was an advantage actually at the time because we were building. there's a lot of smart people. I think there's a lot of smart people. I think Rise of the Risk, from what I understand, I haven't read the book. It's like there's smart people everywhere, right? Like give them, you can, and the technology in the point where people can build technology businesses anywhere. I mean, for us at the time, I think it's changed now. To be honest with you, like the WillowTree experience, like we never outsourced or offshore. We were like literally co-located in the office, and then we expanded offices. That, but like the idea was like, let's get the smart, really, let's get people together into like a co-located space, and let's solve problems. Now, at the time, we were able to get people at a lower cost structure because we were not in San Francisco or New York, where the cost of living was like insanely high, and you know what I mean. So people lived well here. Quality of life is great,
Yeah.
but we were able
Yes.
to build a business on a lower cost structure, which helped us bootstrap the company at the time. And we also were kind of insulated. Like there was a lot of competition for our people because like we were like, I think this changed, by the way. But I do think there's an advantage, right? I think that was our advantage. That's how we kind of like won, if that makes any sense. Um, but yeah, I mean, in this case, I'm not leaving Charlottesville. At least I don't hope not. But yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. But I don't know. I get really
Yeah.
annoyed. I probably shouldn't say this, but I get really annoyed. People just always try to pull me in these conversations about like, they were like, are we the next Austin or blah, blah, blah. And I get so annoyed with that. I'm like, just stop it. Stop it.
Well, there's the venture capital aspect of it, right? And there are just a
Yeah. That's
couple
another
of
conversation.
areas in the United
Yeah.
States where it's concentrated. But in terms of, I absolutely agree. In
Yeah.
terms of lifestyle, people, you can have it
Yeah.
here, right? And have a great
Yeah.
life, have just an amazing lifestyle. So there's that,
Yeah.
right? Another quick pivot
Yeah.
is, what are you doing with cars?
Cars. Oh man, I love cars. Yeah.
Don't
So,
are
yeah, I'm doing,
like,
so I
aren't you
have,
building like a car or something?
yeah, so well, I got really into cars lately, past few years. Things like tracking and racing kind of stuff. But what the fun project is right now, which I'm trying to get done because it's definitely a project. I'll be honest with you, like when I started, it's like ignorance is bliss. Like I had no idea what kind of level of work this thing is going to be. Um, but um, but basically, I'm taking I have a 1985 VW Cabriolet. So if you ever watch like, what's that movie? Can't Buy Me Love or whatever, that white convertible, it almost looks like a rabbit. Classic car. And I'm actually putting in a Nissan Leaf drivetrain. So I'm converting it to electric. So basically, I have been working on that
Oh,
project for a couple of years now. The good news is this is my garage. I got this downstairs. I'm upstairs down, like literally underneath me. I have the entire traction pack's all wired up. Everything's wired up. It's on my bench, which is next to the car. And literally, hopefully tonight or tomorrow, I'll be able to actually plug it all in, fire it up, and get the motor to spin. And so once I get that done, then
oh,
I can
wow.
finish my fabrication and get it all put into this. I'm getting definitely closer to the end goal, but it's been a journey, and it's been hard. It's hard, probably more tedious than hard, if that makes any sense, right? Like it's a pretty simple system, but it's like tedious because there's like a lot of things to be thinking about. The good news is the internet rules because like all my information is coming from like YouTube or like, some really awesome forums like DIY Electric that people are so friendly. Well, sometimes friendly, but open into helping you. Um, and so, yeah, so it's what I've been working on. It's an EV conversion. It's been a learning experience. It's been fun. I like working like it sure scratches all my itches. It's like technical, but then it's like a physical aspect to it, right? Like I'm actually like welding and things like that. So it's fun.
Yeah. Now, so is that going to be the Frankenstein moment for the engine turning
Yeah. If I get the motor to turn, um, that's a huge
motor?
milestone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Technically a motor, but
Uh,
yeah. Yeah. Engine's fine too. Yeah. If I get, yeah. But, but yeah, it doesn't mean I'm done, but it's alive now, sort of like, that's awesome. But here's the deal. I'll be honest with you. Like I am actually at a point where like I've been delaying it because I've been like, I'm afraid of a letdown. Like it's not gonna spin immediately, and I gotta like debug it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's like that procrastination because like, oh my God, what if it doesn't work? You know, that kind of thing. But yeah, I just
Yeah.
have I'm gonna have to do it. So it's gonna happen. So
And what kind of you have the battery pack from a Nissan Leaf itself or a different battery pack?
yeah, I no, it's a Nissan, it's an entire thing. So I basically bought there's a site called Coparts, which is like a junkyardish site. They have a bunch of I
Mhm.
call them junkyards really like across the country, and they basically will you could bid on cars. So like there's like like the car that ends up there like been crashed or whatever, and so I actually bought it off of an auction. It still ran and drained. It was like kind of squished in the back. So like I knew all the core parts that I wanted were fine. It was total according to the insurance place. I actually ended up buying it on auction and shipped it here, and then I disassembled it. It took what I wanted. I took the motor and the gearbox kind of thing. Um, the battery pack, like I took all that out, and then I essentially disassembled the battery pack. Oh, traction not technically, but um, yeah. So basically,
Interesting.
it is kind of Frankenstein. Now you talk about it, it literally is like me putting different non-related things together. Yeah,
Right. Well, we in the when we're doing an autonomous vehicle, we call it the
yeah,
Frankenstein moment when we first get the first automated functions of the drive-by-wire working, right? So it's the moment when it moves the finger and it's alive,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So let
But
me know
then,
when you want to automate it.
yeah, so you probably, oh yeah, that we should do that. Okay, let me get it running first, and then we'll go to that part. Oh my god, that actually should be like more fun, right? Like it's like like it's like because that'd be like okay, but like but you probably know you've been there like okay we're gonna turn it on. Oh my gosh, is this gonna work?
Yeah. Well, when
And
the
you know how
smoke
things
starts
go. They usually
billowing
don't
out,
work.
that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
You know how it goes. And yeah, I mean
yes.
the smoke test, which by the way, I learned about that a long time ago in real life when I was building my own circuit boards and I put power and like the smoke actually came out of it. I was like, oh now I know where they talk about.
Yeah. Well, you gotta be careful with these EVs too. I mean, it's high voltage, so but I guess if it's something that you took out of an existing vehicle,
Yeah.
it's gonna all work out. That's good.
Well, no, not really, because yeah, I had to rewire. I built, the battery management system. I had to like
Oh, okay.
construct it. So, yeah, I did take a lot of the parts from the Nissan Leaf, but it's a different system. So, I made a different, so yeah, so technically it's hot. It's like 380, the whole pack of it's 387 volts, which is bad enough. But then the amperage that it can pop out of that thing. I mean, yeah, don't touch it. I'll be dead if I touch that. So yeah, I'm very
Well,
careful.
I saw a guy with a wrench, like, accidentally touch 2 points and it like the wrench he had rubber gloves on, but it, like, vaporized in his hands. It was like
I'm glad
it
it
was a
gloves on. That would have been a bad day for that thing. He'd been dead.
yeah.
I have gloves too. I got like crazy. Like I probably went overboard like 20,000 volt rated gloves, which is a little crazy, but I'm very nervous.
Yeah.
I've shorted stuff on it already. Like when I put the battery management system before I built the cover, like these covers, I was taking one off and it kind of dropped and touched the other one. It pretty much like exploded. Like it just, I was wearing gloves, thank God. But it was like a loud bang and a flash and I screamed because I was like, I did it. And then, yeah. And then I was like, oh my God. And then think that is all right. But then I talked to my wife later. I'm like, why didn't you come down? She's like, well, I looked out the window and I saw you were moving around. So I figured you're all right because she could see me from the window. So yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. I'm like, great. I'm loved. No, it's fun. And, you just got to be careful. Just be mindful of where you put your hands.
Yes, yes, 100%, yeah. I did a little work with, Neil Young's vehicle back in the day. He had a '59 Lincoln Continental that another group converted into
Yeah.
sort of this it was all electric, and then they had this hybrid sort of onboard charge and motion methodology. But yeah, this was 2009,
Oh,
and
wow. That's cool.
like the whole trunk was just
Yeah.
was a battery pack, and it just uh, it was
Yeah.
there were some moments there,
I
but it was
imagine they're
cool to
probably
watch.
not even probably not even lithium back then, I imagine. Like, I don't know what they were using.
No, they were
Was it
lithium.
lithium?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Um, I forget the brand, but it wasn't the lithium with like there later on after that
Yeah.
they were adding sort of elements into the concoction of these
Yes.
that made the batteries safer, right, and less explosive. But this was
Yeah.
pre less
Yeah.
explosive days.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. I think it's a lot of
Well,
fun. I think, but anyway, that's what I do.
well, this has been
Yeah.
great, Michael. I really appreciate the time here. And yeah, just catching up on all these things AI and learn a little bit about your side project, your hobby with the cars is
Yeah. It's fun.
resonates. I work with cars in a different capacity. They tend to be like vans and buses, so not quite as exciting as race cars, but but they're it's fun nonetheless. So
Yeah.
we share that. But well,
Awesome.
hey, thanks again, man. This has been fantastic. I look forward to hearing where Multiply AI is going to go, and put the website up here. And to learn more about what you're doing, is it multiplyai.team? Is that the
Yep.
website?
That's the site. Or we also have savethehumans.ai if you want
Okay,
to. Yeah. That's a
nice.
fun one that we
All
got.
right,
But either of those, yeah, just hit me up. I mean, uh, if there was like, non-multiply AI stuff, I mean, you can email me at michael@prichardhq.com as well. Then I'll get it.
excellent, excellent. Well, I'll put that all up here in the edited form. I'll edit out some of the delays and the uncomfortable pauses. But this has been great.
It's awesome, man. Appreciate it. A lot of fun.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.